I'm here to talk about my ongoing sonic sculptural project that is currently been developing for a few months. And so this is one of its first iteration that I made um in um last March. And so it's part of an larger installation where um, this I'll explore the context in a bit like later slides. So essentially what happened during the installation was when it so it's held by a metal apparatus that's sort of like borrowed from the kind of like lab equipment, and like it slowly drips into the metallic tray below as part of a larger installation. um and and that process sort of reoccurs, and as I it sort of like disappears completely at the end of each day throughout the show, and like it was replenished the next day when I go there and like in early morning, and like I have to put on a new icicle shaped sort of form. Like so the whole thing sort of stuck in this Sisyphean cycle of melting and production of this icicle, and like it is made of the water sourced. So it's part of this larger work that I sort of made. So the part that I'm developing right now is sort of the second part of it, and trying to like summarize. Yeah, so I guess I'll go back a little bit, and to summarize, it's this, I'm not sure if you still able to see, but it is part of this sonic sculptural installation that I'm currently developing for a show happening in Kyoto Center in the next few months. So it's sort of like it's taken it's sort of situated between two architectural interior spaces, and focusing on the transformation of ice, material cycle of water and ice, and instrumentation and weaponization. The installation sort of expands to the Sisyphean cycle of cataclysms, collective trauma, and violence. It's developed from my ongoing research on artifacts and their residual effects as hyperobjects, cryopreservation, freezing, and freezing as an archival and empirical method. And the 2020 incident during which the 18-year-old Russian driver was frozen to death trying to find the world's coldest city. Called like Sergei Ustinov was frozen to death trying to go from the world's coldest city, Yakutsk, to the port of Magadan, and on the lands of Siberia after Google Maps directed him to the roller boats that's no longer used. I'll go back to this in a bit of later point. And so what happened was that like the road of bones in reference, it was built during this Joseph Stalin era by political prisoners, where 250,000 people died during its construction. And it can be parallel with material process moments before. So like in this expanded work, so this is like an iteration of it, but eventually so these are some of the plans that I've been sort of working on, but because I don't have the actual I'm not able to be on site at this moment because the rest of the install process only begins in October. So so these are some of the proposals and plans. And so in this work, I'm sort of like referencing these two very geographically distinct events that involve the medium of water and the technological process of freezing, and how that sort of like joins together in like spatial contemporarily, and yet both sort of references like how water being this universal solvent, but also becomes the agent of violence. And yeah, and the other thing that I've been sort of referencing is sort of in this uncanny parallel, like at moments before the Fukushima nuclear explosion, cooling processes was used to be implemented in an attempt to ward off the detonation. But the loss of reactor core cooling resulted from the tsunami flooding, led to 3 nuclear meltdowns, 3 hydrogen explosions, and the release of radioactive contamination. Water was subsequently extracted to contain the nuclear waste. So in this case, it sort of becomes the tool. But the water in use was affected by radiation, and leakage was reported throughout the years in the aftermath of the explosion. And this, I've been sort of researching on this like since a few months ago. And like the news sort of recently broke out about Japan's in the process of like doing a new round of actively releasing those nuclear affected water that has been stored on site in those like very large tanks. And even though they have been implementing a process of like filtering those waters through very intricate systems of tunnels before, so that as a way to dilute it in the chemical process, but it still sparkled huge controversies for nations around and beyond the Pacific Ocean area. And to sort of connect these two, just find like, so like the work that I've been developing sort of involves parts of it that has been made. And so the installation is sort of triggered by the presence of people within the 2 galleries, and alternating between field recordings, which will be taken at a field trip to Fukushima at the beginning of November, the Fukushima nuclear disaster site, and also the sound of freezing and melting, like the sound of water dripping from the ice sculpture to the metal tray, and also the real-time sound of people being in proximity to the ice sculpture. And that's been produced from the transformation cycle of water, sort of coalescing in an open-ended sonic assemblage and performative process of cryo-freezing are referenced in the manifestation and manufacturing of tools and weapons made of ice through the medium of water, and revealing and examining its registers of harm and synergy inscribed upon the bodies, while spotlighting water as the universal solvent on both material and symbolic levels. And so essentially what I've been negotiating is to source water from to source actual pond water that's in like remnants of those like residual water that's been left in those tunnels, which is accessible through through the underground flooding system, and also perhaps on site near the epicenter of the past disaster. Yeah, so sort of traversing in the interspace between life and death and biotechnological processes like crowd politics and abjection, is sort of trying to explore the process of rebuilding from the ground zero catastrophe manifesting in liminal memorial site in the sonic void outside of human time. And some of the things I've been referencing, so like in particular, I see my work is sort of between visual sculptural practice and sound practice. And so usually it's more of so for this work, it's, sorry, I'm trying to get to the slide that was, sorry, just a second. So like in this work, it's sort of is suspended over this amplified like metal tray and sort of created a constant dripping sound, which was punctuated by loud like bangs of stones, and like it had like embedded in the eyes, and that was like produced the sound heard when upon like close to actual melting. There's sort of like gentle constant dripping, but then there's also like a sudden crack or a bang that would sort of give the audience a jolt. So there's like a little this work sort of like facilitates I think an understanding of like water being in like as a hyperobjects that's demonstrative of slow violence, even though being this benevolent like universal solvent. So it's just not just a gradual steady process that we can rely that we experience in real time, but it can also be like sudden and violent in nature and create a sort of constant feeling of nervous anticipation that we can't just sit back and relax to this gentle dripping sound. It sort of encourage a kind of like anxiety that is perhaps more what we should be feeling when we contemplate the melting and like the dripping of water in this case. Yeah, so I think considering, I'm not sure how long have I has the time has like spent, but I guess I'll just quickly go through some of the other slides that I have. And these are some of the schematics of the works, and a very simplified like of how like the whole thing works and how things are installed.